AMD Ryzen processors versus the Intel competition. And why you would take one versus the other, because there seems to be a lot of confusion, a lot of, I'm not sure how to put it. A lot of people looking at things in a different way that might not necessarily work for the everyday person. The common person might not fall into this category. So I want to kind of break it down for somebody like you or me. Well, not necessarily me, but I'm a little bit different. But the average person, because the average person, like it or not, the average person is the kind of person I'm talking about, is the person that will go and buy a pre-built computer, or will build one from scratch if they're a little crafty, and they'll put everything together, they'll plug it in, and then they won't touch anything. Run completely stopped. So we're talking about those kind of people here, which are fine. There's nothing wrong with that. So, because I'm trying to talk to the bulk of people here, so enthusiasts that watch my channel might not really get a whole lot out of this, and they might disagree. They might rage, because I'm going to go against the grain here. But has been my philosophy as I say what I think. And so feel free to disagree. So what I'm talking about here is there seems to be a lot of, again, not finding the right words to put in there. There seems to be a lot of different ways to categorize the different CPUs on the market now. Because we've got a lot of different competing CPUs now from two companies, AMD and Intel. And they're competing on a couple of different strategies. Intel, a slightly more performance, a more well-known brand. People really cling on to that, and they just been dominating for years and years. Where AMD is trying to get back into somewhat of a fold, get their foot in the door as such, and they're really trying to step up their performance, but they've always been more of a person that had more cores per dollar. Okay? Now, the important thing to know is everybody latches on to the AMD side of the cores, and everybody latches on to the instructions per clock for Intel. Rightfully so, mind you, given the history. However, things have changed a little bit. So I want to go over what has kind of changed and what you might want to consider looking at and how you want to look at it before you actually make a purchase. Or if you want to upgrade, or if you're even thinking about upgrading. So what I want to do is, what I want to do is I want to look at what the two processors are going to be comparing this. And a lot of you see a tab open already, and you're going to go, oh, that's not what you compare. No, that's probably one of the biggest controversies that I want to set straight. There are a lot of tech enthusiasts and reviewers and tech heads, in my personal opinion, in my humble opinion, are doing it wrong. Well, wrong. Doing it wrong is a strong word. I say doing it differently, in a more interesting fashion. Because a lot of people compare processors. This is especially true for processors, mind you. They compare processors via price. I don't necessarily do that. I compare processors versus spec to spec if I can. Now, if spec falls in line with price, well then of course I do price to price. But the thing is here is a lot of people compare the Ryzen 5s to the i5s, the Intel i5s, and I thought that was a little bit odd. And so I double checked. I double checked a handful of times because I wanted to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. And sure enough, I wasn't. if you look at like the L2 and the L3 and the power consumption and all this stuff, you look at the cores, the threads. If you look at all this, pause the stream if you want. Not stream, sorry. Yeah, pause the video if you want to, and take a good long look at it. Okay. Now let's switch over to the Intel i7-7700K. So you see a similarity here. They're both quad cores. They both have 8 threads. Granted, Intel's clocked a little higher, and I can tell you for certain it does overclock a little higher. But it has more L2, it has more L3. No, I'm sorry. It has less L2, less L3. It has 8 threads because it has hyper-threading, where Ryzen has SMT. They both use DDR4. Dual memory, of course. And it's just, but this one actually uses more watts. But you know, we all know it doesn't actually go to that wattage. It just, that's how much it can go up to, or TDP. So dissipating. Anyway, it's actually, believe it or not, very, very similar. And a lot of people are gonna go, well, but the price difference. Well, what's the price? What is actually the price? If we look at the price, the 1500X is $190. The i7-7700K is full retail $350. I'll just my trusty dusty calculator real quick, because I'm lazy. That's a difference of $160. But I know what a lot of you are thinking. A lot of you are thinking, but DB, it's the i7 is more performance. It's definitely more performance. It's way more performance. So it's worth that extra $160. Well, let's take a look. Let's see exactly if it is. Now remember, there's a couple things that i7 does do over the Ryzen. It can use Thunderbolt, because it does have the graphics and the Thunderbolt and all that stuff. I never use it, but hey. It does overclock farther. And there was one other thing I forget. Now, anyway, at least it overclocks farther and uses Thunderbolt at the very least. I forget what the other one is, but people will fill me in on it. So, yeah, you got that. But is that worth the extra $160? I don't know. Let's take a look at some of the benchmarks I managed to scour across the internet. Now, granted, I don't have these processors, so I had to go and borrow some of these benchmarks from well-known, well-established, and well-established benchmark websites, which I full-heartedly endorse because they're totally reputable and they're totally fine. So, first one's from Paul Hardware, not Paul Hardware, Tom's Hardware. Sorry, Paul. Anyway. Now, you see they don't have any i7s here, but they do have Ryzen. And the one thing you notice here is we're going to I tried to go with Battlefield here, Battlefield 1, but it was really hard to get a lot of benchmark scores for a lot of resources for just that game. But anyway, you can look at the Ryzen 1500 stock. It's like the average is 100, right? Well, well, we go over here to Tech Power Up, and their average is 127 frames per second. Okay, so it's between 100 and 127 frames per second at 1080p at stock, right? Because that's what we're looking for. We're looking mostly for stock. You can get it if you overclock farther, and you can see the 700K there if you want to. That kind of spoils it for us, but hey, it's there. We'll come back to that in a bit. And again, we're going to stock Battlefield 1 from the Nexus, and it's 127 frames per second. Okay, so that's our Ryzen 1500X. That's our $190 processor. Okay. Now, if we go to Nexus and we look at this Battlefield 1 with the 700K stocked, it's 141. 141 frames. And this is really good because it shows you an entire lineup of what the hell's going on. Because it shows you the 7700K, the 6700K, and the 4790K, which is what I have. And they're all about 140, 141 frames per second. Even overclocking it, at least with this game, doesn't actually improve all that much. So if we go back, because some of these actually had what we were going to look at anyway. The 4790K, again, for 140. Stock, 140, this is at 145. Then go over here, it says 140. So it's all very consistent that the 7700K stock-ish, if not stock, is 140 frames per second on Battlefield 1, where it's very consistent that Battlefield 1 is 127, 126 frames per second on Ryzen 1500X. A 13 frame difference. It's just 13 frames. So, my question to you, my question to all of you guys, is 13 frames and a couple of those extra things that Intel CPU does, that AMD CPU doesn't do, is that worth an extra $160? I don't know. Like I said, it does overclock farther. The i7 does overclock farther than Ryzen. But again, we're talking about people that just want to plug in and play. We're not talking about people that want to fiddle with things and tweak things. We're just talking about standard users here. That being said, if you are not a standard user and going for that, let's talk about those people. You're going for that, and you want to overclock, and you want to do all that stuff. Is it actually worth the extra 13 frames, for example? Is that actually worth $160 more? Me personally, I don't see the value there. But I could see some people, because of the extra things that Intel does, they might actually prefer that and understand that Intel does have more of a recognizable brand that does sell. I understand some people will buy because of that. But just pure based on performance wise, um, I don't know. Like a lot of people are going off and saying that they're just saying that AMD's main selling point is more cores. No, they actually increased the instruction per clock a lot. It's the thing is that, and this is going to sound contradictory to the Nexus benchmarks that we saw, but the couple of videos, and I'm sorry I didn't want to show videos in my video, but the couple, because I could only find video benchmarks of the 4790K because I don't have Battlefield 1, unfortunately. It showed Ryzen either mashing it in some cases, well, not necessarily Battlefield 1, in most games, but sometimes in Battlefield 1, it would show it in mashing it, or in lower settings, or it would show in other games. Well, I don't remember exactly where again, but it would actually show, if you can go and look up Ryzen 1500X versus i7 4790K, and you'll actually see some benchmark videos that I never recognized them before, but they're there, and you will actually see the Ryzen actually either keep pace or fall very subtly below the 4790K, which tells me that they did hit that Haswell-like performance, except for some games specifically that we saw in Nexus. In some cases, Ryzen does fall a little bit behind. I have seen that Ryzen is somewhere between 10 frames to 20 frames behind in most benchmarks when they go up against an i7. It's usually the lesser though. It's not usually the full 20. And again, it goes down to, are you comfortable paying the $160 for the extra performance? Now, why would we use an i7, a current i7 versus an Intel 6 core or an 8 core, all that stuff? Why would we use a Ryzen 1500 when we could just get a Ryzen 6 core or 8 core or whatever that? Well, here's the thing. Again, we're going to go back. I'm going to reference the Nexus because they actually did a really good video where they tested streaming performance with Ryzen, and they tested the 6-core Ryzen versus the i7. I think it was the 7700K. But here's the thing: they tested it. If I remember right, you can go look this up because I'm not 100% sure. If I remember right, they tested it with 10,000 bitrate. 10,000 bitrate. And yeah, the Ryzen 6 core handle it much better. Now here's the thing: as a streamer, as a video content creator person, as all those things, and a gamer, when I stream, I never go over 2500 bitrate. Because the goal as most streamers, unless you have an insane rig and insane internet, is you want as much people watching as possible. You don't want to go for the cap on bitrate. You don't want to go for that. And besides, you're only going for around 720p. You're not. Most people, unless again they're insane, are not going to go for 1080. Not going to go for 4K. I think I covered it maybe on one of my past shows that I don't do anymore. Is that 1080p stream and above is a fantasy. It's not really fantasy. It's impractical because it takes so much bandwidth to do and to watch. Only select people are actually going to be able to watch that smoothly. So that's why most people go for 720. And most people dial down to just barely putting out a smooth 720. And the reason being is so you can get the most people watching as possible. Because a lot of people, especially abroad, are still having like 3 megabyte down, 5 megabyte down. So you still want those people to watch too. So it doesn't make any sense to go up as high as they did. So that's one thing they just did just for the test. Okay, so that being said, that's a reason. Another reason is, well, the i7 is a $350 processor. Wouldn't you want to go and get another $350 processor like a Ryzen 8, which is like $400, or a Ryzen 8? This is 300. I think there's a Ryzen 300. I think the 1700 is 300. I'm not sure. I'm not entirely sure. Anyway, well, the reason I didn't do that is, like I said at first, it is not price versus price here. It is spec versus spec. And spec versus spec, the 1500X more or less is an i7. The i7 7700K performs slightly better, but cost much, much more. So, and a lot of people are going to counter that and say, well, if you have the money, why wouldn't you just buy more? Well, I would kind of say, why would you buy more if you don't need more? Little food for thought. So, I don't know, again, I don't know if it's worth it to spend the extra money. In your case, I don't know, I don't know if it's worth it to just save the extra money and go with that. It depends on the user. It depends on the user. It depends on what you're doing. It depends on a lot of different things. But I personally, from my point of view, unless you hate AMD and you only buy Intel, or unless you're doing something that needs something that only an Intel processor will do, or you want the overclocking that Intel has over AMD, there's actually no reason right now that I can see at all, unless you unless you want the extra frames. So there's 4 reasons. There's no reason whatsoever besides those 4 reasons why you would buy an i7 7700K over a Ryzen 1500X, or even in some cases a 1400. So